Hi, Soheil.
Hello, how are you? I think that we have to describe or like about ourselves and the frame. Okay, you go ahead first, please.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna turn on my video because I need to look at myself as I do it. Okay, there we go. So, hi, I'm Coleen. I am a woman with blue eyes, dark hair that is quite long as I haven't cut it in a while. Behind me, I have a bookshelf and a plant and a door. And I'm wearing blue and yellow.
Okay, I am a shaved head man. I call myself a brown man, and I'm wearing a black turtleneck. The background behind me is white, and my eyes are green.
Awesome. So it's so exciting. I'm so excited to be able to converse with you, Soheil. It's been quite a while since we've been in the same space.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. First of all, I have to thank Cahoots Theater for inviting me to have this conversation with you, Colleen. This is quite exciting, and yeah, you're right. Like, I'm glad to see you, and we have a bit of history. Like you and I have known each other for a few years right now, and we have had several informal, friendly conversation about theater in some coffee houses in downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
So this is really, like, I consider today's talk a kind of a continuation of our of those conversations that we
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is quite exciting. So yeah, before anything is, tell me how life has been treating you during the pandemic.
Yeah,
How's everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when we're asking those questions of like, how are you? And it's such a, it kind of hits you because it's like in the pandemic, I feel like we are kind of reckoning with ourselves all the time. I'm doing okay. I feel like recently I feel over technologicalized. Is that a word? Like, I feel like I'm getting over stimulation from technology. So I'm trying to find ways to just be quieter. Like today I actually just like looked out the window and watched the rain fall on this crabapple tree beside my house and just like took a moment to not be online. And I mean, this is a privilege to be able to have this technology, obviously, so we can have these conversations. I'm gonna close my window. But yeah, I'm feeling a little bit needing to kind of slow down and you get into nature. Now everything's starting to bloom. But overall, it's been, yeah, really eye-opening. And I think we're gonna get more into that topic. It's been quite a crazy year on so many levels for all of us. And a lot of learning has happened for sure.
14 months has passed. 14 months. Unbelievable. I don't know. Where did it go? Where did it go? The past 14 months, it was like so quick. Mm-hmm. That's unbelievable. Yes.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And I also feel like in the beginning, I don't know if you felt this way, at the beginning of the pandemic when it first was announced, I guess that was March 11th, I think. Yeah. I remember just being in a kind of fog and taking in information, but not really digesting it. And I feel like now after a year, I went back to some articles that I had been reading a year ago, and I actually could digest it. Like, it's like just interesting how there was a shock that happened to the system for us all. So it's a different kind of reflection that's happening right now, which, yeah, is a different kind of learning, I think. But what about yourself? How have you been this past year?
Yeah, like everybody else, but at the beginning a bit crazy, and I had to process the whole thing, try to understand, like what was going on. Yeah. But yeah, it's been a very interesting year. At the same time, as you said, an eye-opener. I've learned a lot about myself, about life.
Yeah.
The first thing I realized was how helpless humanity is. Sometimes we get so proud of ourselves, we get so arrogant, and we think that we are the master of the universe. Humanity, and advance of science and all these things. But now you realize, yeah, we're pretty helpless. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why like I start like appreciating the mystery of existence,
Mm.
the beauty, the greatness of this existence. And so, yeah, it's been like a lot of like negative news. Of course, witness the suffering of millions of people, the death. That's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That's no good. But at the same time, like, yeah, you realize, as I said, it's an eye opener. You start like seeing things, recognizing things, realizing things that if you never thought
Yeah.
about them before.
Yeah.
That's what that's again, is life, is a journey of life, and that's really interesting. Yeah, very interesting what is happening. It's disturbing, but it's interesting.
But yeah, the reckoning of our limits of our own existence. There's something,
Mhm.
not everyone lives through plagues, but it seems that like whenever there has been historically a plague, there's also been a massive transformation societally. So I feel like it is kind of like a internal transformation, but also a societal transformation. And not to say obviously that
Yeah.
we want the suffering so that the transformation
Mhm.
happens, like not to belittle that. I don't obviously want the pandemic to be here, but there
Mhm.
is something about that, like I think in March 2020, I was running around trying to do like 100 things. And I think I was in a theater space actually at Tarragon, working on a play. And like I was supposed to, I just felt like I was almost like on a train that was just like going. And then the train stopped. And I feel like personally, um, it was important for me to then say, wait, where am I right now? What kind of world do I actually want to live in? Is this,
Mhm.
it allowed me to stop. And often I don't feel like I could, because I need to make money, or I needed to like, this kind of capitalist machinery was
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
in me, even though I fight against it as an artist. So yeah, there was something really profound for sure. And I think
Mhm.
I'm only realizing the effects now after a year.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting because this kind of like situation that everything stops all of a sudden,
Yeah.
and this kind of like you see this tragedy. For me, it's not something new because personally,
Oh,
I witnessed a bloody revolution in 1979 when I
exactly.
was pretty young in Iran, and that was it. Like all of a sudden, the entire country would shut down. The
Yeah.
theaters and arts and everything just kind of disappeared. And yeah, especially like for me, it was like a very terrifying experience as a young man witnessing that revolution and
Yeah.
seeing a lot of people, my friends, and even some of my relatives that died in that revolution or got killed. So yeah, like a kind of like I am a bit familiar
Yeah.
more than Canadians with disasters. So
Oh,
so
how
yeah,
old were you then during the revolution?
I'm sorry.
How old were you?
I was 26 years old when the
Right.
revolution happened. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I
Wow.
was in my fourth year at the theater school, the final year when the revolution happened. Yeah,
It was your final year. Wow.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's life. Great. Okay. I would like to ask you some exciting question. Hopefully, you get excited about this. Just looking at your resume and your work, and we have spoken, already. So, it's fascinating. What you have achieved already. Consider your age, like you're half of my age yet, and you have like been everywhere, and you have done so many great things, in theater, and it's really fascinating. First of all, I want to congratulate you for
Thank
all
you.
you have
Thank
done,
you.
what all you have done, which is quite exciting. One question that, Colleen, you introduce yourself usually, and as we heard your bio,
Yeah.
as a half Parsi Indian, Irish Canadian
Yeah.
theater maker.
Oh
this
my
is
God.
just this is just remarkable combination. Just look at it. Parsi, Parsi, Indian, Irish, Canadian. sometimes I was just looking at your, like, and this and said, like, you contain the United Nations within yourself already. Like
That's
four
hilarious.
interesting, beautiful, like nationality or race, like, or ethnicity, whatever you call it.
Right. Yes, yes, yes.
No, my like, question. Perhaps you've been asked this question before, but doesn't matter. I'll ask it again. I wonder how this mixed race heritage has influenced your work as an artist
Hmm.
and who you are today.
Hmm. Okay, so yeah,
Tell
so
me a little bit about that.
yeah, no, that's a big question. It's so fascinating you're asking this because this is part of my research and questioning with being the creator in residence at Cahoots is exploring this idea of mixedness, in betweenness, being someone that is presenting white often. So then I have that privilege and that reality. And yet inside, there's a whole reality that sometimes I feel like I need to affirm, um, especially as a lot of that side of my culture, like my Parsi and Indian side, was, yeah, sort of like not erased, but subsumed into Canadian identity. So as an artist, I think a lot of my work, well, I feel like I'm kind of at the beginning of my work on this, but I'm interested in exploring that reality. Like, what is that? And I think also in terms of how we are all a multiplicity, actually, if we look at it. And I'm interested in exploring the dichotomy in terms of like how it has shaped me as an artist. My company itself, I'm really interested in something that I call like the hyphenated space. So it's like that space between where like the difference kind of meets and actually there's something new that is created. I'm interested in like multiple languages on stage, disabling the audience's perception in terms of like language and who is on the stage as well, performing. I created a play that then toured to Egypt, and we did half of it in Arabic and half in English, all Egyptian actors on stage. And that was a really exciting experience as well. And it was really like in the rehearsal room, I feel like that hyphenated space like is created. It's and then it becomes what it is on stage. Almost yeah, it's kind of imperceptible in a way. But having those conversations and I think that it's going to be something I'm going to continually explore. But and then me as a person, the second part was about, what was the second question? It was first as an artist and then
And who you are, like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, like I think, I grew up in Cambridge, Ontario. And my mother came to Canada when she was 9 from India. And so she really wanted to kind of instill in us and my sister a sense of our identity, yet she sort of had lost some of that. So as a kid, I would go to like Zoroastrian classes and learn, try to like, I would learn the prayers in ancient Persian and Avestan. But then I always felt that I didn't quite belong there. And then in my school, all the kids were sort of like, going and doing their communion, having a nice white dress. And I was like, oh, wait, did I get a white dress? But I didn't, because yeah. So I've always been in that in between. And I think in a way, it's kind of a special place to be as a kid who wanted to become a writer or an artist, because you're constantly in that space of not interrogation, that's not the right word, curiosity.
Curiosity, yeah.
Yeah, and kind of like questioning, wait, why? Right? And so yeah, I think it's definitely something that I am really exploring right now in my work, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. Yeah.
Have you traveled to India? Have you been in,
Yeah.
searching, going back the hometown of your mother or
Yeah.
any?
Well, yeah. So for the first time I went to India, I was 13 and I visited my family there. I still have family in Bangalore and Mumbai, at the time in Ahmedabad. We didn't go to my mom's hometown actually. And I kind of feel like at some point I'd like to. It's on the other side of the country. It's near Calcutta, in Jamshedpur. So I haven't gone out there. So I visited, and that was really powerful as a 13-year-old who lived in, the suburbs, like in Cambridge, like grew up. And yeah, it just completely, I remember came back and I wrote all this poetry I think it was grade 9, maybe. Yeah, it was in grade 9, about my experiences. And then I went again to India when my mom was in California, and my parents are separated. So it was just my mom, my sister at home. So it was just my sister and I at home, and I was 15. And I got all sorts of things out of the basement to sell. I think she's gonna kill me when she listens to this. But anyways, I like sold all these things that I knew she didn't need, and borrowed my sister's credit card and bought a flight to India. And I joined this NGO doing a project along the Ganges.
Hmm.
And so I just kind of took off sorry, I wasn't 15, I was 20. That would be ridiculous at 15. I was 22, I think. Yeah, 22. So then that trip was really special because I went all the way up into Rishikesh and all the way down along the Ganges, exploring the dichotomy of the river and how it was ecologically, like, and this is 2006, no, 2005. The river itself is so saturated that a botanist had told us it wasn't a river anymore, and yet there's the spirituality of it as well. So we were exploring that at the time. It was the first time they did this trip. And so, yeah, I went out and did some street theater. Apparently, I remember the leader of the organization was like, "You're going to do the play." And I was like, "Okay, how? Like, how do I do a play?" And yeah, so then we made a play. We did it on rooftops. We did it in schools. We did it in the streets. And that was really transformative, actually. At that, I think I was like, "Oh, okay, this is possible. I can do this." Yeah. So that was a very important experience. And then I also visited family after as well. So it was like a important time.
It's
Yeah.
such an inspiring country, especially for an artist. We were there, like, with my little family before we migrated to Canada. We were in India for 1 year.
Really?
And yes, yeah, so we stayed mostly in the city of Mysore and Bangalore.
Yeah.
That was like in
City.
Karnataka. But
Yeah.
yeah, we were there for 1 year. My God, like it was just, I fell in love with that country, with that culture.
Oh,
It's amazing. It's like I just call it like my friend like loved my description. I said India is pregnant with mystery. It's full of beauty and mystery, that country.
yeah.
So yeah, especially like there, like I as a young man, I escaped Iran. I escaped the revolution. So we were there in India, and there I got really more familiar, and I studied like Mahatma Gandhi and his nonviolence, vision, So it was really an important year, like 1983, like a year before we moved to Canada, was a very important, like, event in my life, like going to India and living in that country. I wish that I could speak, the language, in those days I neither speak English or any other like Indian dialects at all, but still I managed with my family after 1 year being there, and in that beautiful country. So yeah, that's amazing. That's why I say, like, like artists, they have to, like, it doesn't matter, musician, filmmakers, theater artists, they have to visit India.
Yeah.
It's a must. It's such a beautiful country.
Some of my like favorite memories are actually of being in the northern part of India in a place called Rishikesh, which is like, I think the Beatles made it really famous because that's like,
Yes.
yeah, they like went there and learned yoga and everything. But yeah, it is the birth of yoga is sort of there
Mhm,
because
mhm.
the spiritual beginning, I guess, of the pilgrimage down to Varanasi. So you start
Yeah.
there and you go all the way down as a yogi until you die, basically. Yeah. So it's just, like the incredible spirituality that you can feel when you're there. And I remember these um, fireflies at night, and just like the air being covered in fireflies. And then you wake up in the morning, it's just bells because the temples are just being rung. And it's just, it's a magical place. But India is so extreme. Like you see the most
Yep.
horrific, and then you see the most beautiful, and then you see the most like it's so colorful and it's so dark. Like
That's
you
right.
can kind of reckon with existence when you go to India. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. That I'm glad that you shared that your story and your trip to India.
yeah.
That fascinating, country. Okay, Colleen, that's yeah. That I had another question actually. Like you kind of answered it,
Yeah.
because you said that your focus at Cahoots. In your bio, I read it. You
Yeah.
said that your focus is on developing new work inspired by your mixed race heritage. You
Yes.
kind of answered that, but could you a little bit more explain, like, what is that? What kind of work? Could you
Sure.
give us an example? What do you do? Like one of the projects that you're working on?
Well,
Is there like you could give me some, like an example? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's in its very early stages right now. But Tanisha reached out to me and she asked me, "Have you ever written about your mixed race heritage?" And I was like, "Yes." And I had like all of this writing that was kind of just, I had never really thought about making a piece that's asking these questions about race from my perspective and from
Mhm.
my experiences and from my family's perspective. Um, and so from that, I became the creator in residence. And so the things that I've been doing is not so much creating the play itself. Right now, I'm in a research phase,
Mhm.
and I've been having conversations with family members. I've been having conversations with, um, there was Dastur, which is a Parsi priest, and just having conversations about ritual. I'm really interested in like rituals that were lost over the ocean. Like, um, I've been looking at old photographs that my grandfather took, of a laboratory that he had created in India, or was instrumental in being a part of creating. And they're very empty photographs, actually, like just an image. And it's just like I'm trying to kind of get the the essence of the things that have been lost over time in the assimilation process. Because as someone who is descendant from an immigrant, and my mom was very young, so that's a very different story as well. I'm interested in the things that were lost. So I'm trying to resurrect them. So a lot of the writing is like poetic. It's from my perspective. I've been looking at journal entries from that crazy trip where I like didn't tell my mom I was going to India, and then went to India. Don't ever do that. It's a bad idea. But anyways, as a 20-year-old, yeah, and I have all sorts of writing from that time.
Wow.
Very naive, obviously, like but I'm like trying to capture how I reckon with the place, that has a long history of my past. And then I'm also interested in the historical, like ancient Persian history, like, and the mapping and the movement of the Indo-Europeans,
Yeah.
and like how they went to India and then they came back, and trying
Mm.
to figure out like the migration paths so that we can talk about migration as well, and how
Interesting.
we're all
Interesting. Yeah.
products of migration if we really look at the history. So I'm yeah, it's very early stages right now. So
That's amazing. That's a process. That's a
it's a
process, of
process.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sometimes, as like, device creation, especially like sometimes takes years. Like one
yeah,
of the major stages of the development is the research
yeah,
stage of it. And you are in that research stage,
yeah.
which the way you're describing it, like, it reminded me of a archaeological approach to the whole
Right.
thing. You're like an archaeologist that you
Yeah,
go when you want to discover, like going unearthing
yeah,
those past, that's because of archaeology has always, fascinated me. And I love that concept. And I don't know, like sometimes, like even in my creation, the
yeah,
theater creation, I talk about it. I said, like, it's a sense of archaeology that we have to go to the past and uncover things and discover and uncover, So that's
yeah.
fascinating. That's
And
what you say. Yeah.
how it
Mhm.
relates to the present, like uncovering it and then asking like, what is the present tense like gesture that we want to put out to the world right now. But I love that image of archaeology. It's interesting because I also had a really amazing conversation with a half Parsi, half Scottish, I think.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he's older than me. His mother immigrated when she was older, so it's a different story. But it was amazing talking to somebody that like had the similar experiences I had. Like it was just, and so that's part of the project too, of being like, okay, hang on, like how can we tell this story, right? Like there's more than, a lot of us are mixed race. Like what's the story? Not that everyone has the same story, but I think it's an important story to talk about. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Colleen, I know that you studied with you studied movement and writing at Lecoq, the
Yeah.
famous Lecoq,
Yeah.
the amazing Lecoq that like a lot of Canadian theater makers have been influenced by Lecoq, studied at Lecoq. Amazing, like the Lecoq's contribution to Canadian theater is very unique, I
Yeah.
would say, because I know a lot of like Canadian theater artists studied with Lecoq. So my question, beside Lecoq,
Yeah.
where are your influences coming from? Do you have other influences in
Yeah.
terms of theater? Like, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And just to kind of jump off what you're saying, because for me, my Lecoq experience was quite different because
Mm-hmm.
my second year was the first year that they did writing. And
Interesting.
and normally like writing happens in the second year to a degree, but not as a actual like investigation. And I think the story goes that like Lecoq was on his deathbed and Michel Azama, who's a French playwright, uh, he came to his side, I think, and Lecoq said, the one thing that's missing is writing. Can you teach? And he said no, because he was basically like, I will never write my plays if I say yes. So he said no. And then when I was there, he came back to the school. So Michelle Asma and Susanna Listretto taught writing from a movement-based perspective. So we were all writing in French and Spanish and Italian. I don't speak the other two languages, I just speak French. And then we worked on these movement principles and applied it to writing. So a lot of my work, I explore that, but kind of, it's always an investigation. It's not like set rules. So I'm interested in that territory of exploration. But other things that inspire me, like I'm really, really interested in like Katie Mitchell's work. A lot of different playwrights, I would say, inspire me with their like, really radical way of looking at theater. Like I think of Susan Laurie Parks, Young Jean Lee, I think, and also like other writers like Carol Churchill and Enda Walsh. I feel like writers really, really inspire me. And then directors like Katie Mitchell, who really explores technology, sound, music,
Interesting.
in a way that's really innovative. And I was super lucky because I got into a Zoom room, which this is kind of amazing time where we can like take in so much, knowledge right now and learn. And I was in a room where she was basically telling us what her process was as a director. And so I learned a lot from her in that way. And she's like, no movement people, thank you very much. Like she even said, and I was like, okay. She's very much more in the Stanislavski world. More about psychological drama. And I think that is as important as the body, being able to conceptualize a piece, and not that like Lecoq-based theater doesn't have that. It's just a different angle of exploration. It's a tool to be your own type of theater, right? Because I mean, the school was all about original theater creation. So yeah, I think that it's really just watching work, watching people create work.
This is interesting because, like might be something generational I'm learning as well. My generation as a theater director, like, my influences came from many different places.
Right.
It wasn't just like, a lot of people think because I'm from Iran, everything is, Iranian thing. It's not like it's an important, it was like that theatrical tradition was important and I'm very proud of it. But my influence comes from many other places. My generation as a director, as a theater director, my influence, like I started like, with Meyerhold and Grotowski,
Yeah.
and then Edward Gordon Craig, like the Western avant-garde. And I was interested, for example, in a lot of like Eastern theatrical traditions, like Japanese, especially. I was fascinated by no theater and kabuki, and I did a lot of research those days when I was younger, and so that's my question. That your generation still, do you see like people would be interested, like exploring and examining, for example, Antoine Artaud or
Yes.
Grotowski.
Yeah.
Still, do you think or have you been interested to do some exploration of these and this like theatrical genius?
Yeah. Well, no, everything you're saying, and I want to hear more of your story, Soheil. Yeah, I would say that my generation definitely is inspired by Grotowski, definitely inspired by, like, I have a performer that I work with a lot. She does Butoh, and that has found its way into some of the work that I've created because she really brings that into the room. Yeah, I would say that, like, because my original, like, I went to the University of Toronto, and then when I was at U of T, we really explored, but more in an intellectual way, right? All of the history, theater history. So Meyerhold, symbolist theater, going through all of the history of it. But the actual practical application, I don't know. That's a good question, because I feel like the practical application was lost a little bit for me. And that's why I went to France, because I was like, I need to get my hands dirty and like figure out what I want to make. And that was the language that spoke to me at the time, because I was working with some people who had gone to the school. But who knows? Maybe it could have been really anything. Maybe I would have been in Poland and like studied or something, because I think I just needed to get out of I needed a new place, I think, to open up. And yeah, it was super challenging. Definitely, like, should have saved money before I went. But anyways. Yeah. But I think people are using different traditions in their work for sure. But I think there's a leaning towards Stanislavski for sure.
Oh, definitely. Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember in the theater school, Tehran, in Iran, like, I'm talking like in mid-70s, the first thing we walked into the theater school was a Stanislavski. It's international everywhere. Beside having all those like that Iranian, drama and Iranian, theatrical, studies and all those things, Stanislavski is there, like,
Right.
and all those like books we've been translated, like, building, what do you call it? I just can't recall in the names anymore, like the characters building, something like
building
all
a
this
character,
being, building, that's what,
I
it's
think
been all translated, it's there, like, so. But again, like, I think it is important for me always as a theater director, like, I studied like these great people, they explored their work, their methodology, of course. But again, I try to make sure that I never imitate them. I never imitated them. I try to use them as a springboard to create my own theater, to create my own vocabulary. And I think this is really important, because I've seen, like, back home in Iran, everywhere in Europe, that people go to study no theater in Japan, they come back and they start copying it, imitating it, honestly, and it's useless. That it's utterly useless to say, what is this? Because you cannot imitate the work of another artist or another tradition. Like, especially something like kabuki, it's rooted in the thousands of years of work in a culture. Like flamenco, it's the same thing. Like you cannot imitate, and that's what I learned when I did Blood Wedding. When I directed Blood Wedding, I just really refused to have flamenco dance on stage. I said, this is ridiculous. It's not going to work. It's like a false, or what do you call it, imitation of a great culture. Like it's phony. So interesting.
What is sort of like a moment in your directing? You have such an incredible career, Soheil, and like I've always been so inspired by your work. And I'm just interested, like, is there a moment in your life where there was a like someone or a project you worked on that was like really transformative for you?
It is. Yep, like it's a very good question. Of course, like I've seen great productions that been some of them been very influential,
Yeah.
really like a turning point in in my life. One of the major thing, like it was very interesting. It was the first year of the revolution in Iran, and usually the first year of the revolution is a chaotic year. Like everything is possible. That's the best year for artists in a chaos because there is no rule, there is no censorship. You can create. I saw like some fascinating theater projects in Iran in the first year of the revolution. I saw one of the exceptional King Lear in Iran, a translation, of course, in Farsi language. That was like amazing. That I was just like like really that's a game changer for me. The other very important piece of theater that really like changed the direction of my life and give it a different perspective of theater was a show that I play that I eventually translated it into English and produced it in Canada a couple of times. The Death of the King by Iranian playwright and film theater and film director Bahram Bezai. That was like amazing. That was a turning point. Like
Wow.
the totally like non-traditional, non-conventional staging of this play. Like it was just fascinating. I saw that production 5 times, and then that was, to be honest, one of the major reason I decided to escape my country was that show. After I saw that show, I
Really?
realized that that's what I want to go. That's the direction I want to go. To really explore and do some like projects like that because I was sick and tired of like a realistic and naturalistic
Right.
theater. Like in Iran, even we had the kitchen sink type of theater. We had it,
Yeah.
and it was just going against that kind of theater. And that was it. Then I said, look, I'm still young. I know this Islamic revolution won't allow me to grow as
Yeah.
an artist
Yeah.
for many different reasons that I can explain it another time. So I decided to escape Iran and to pursue the theater I wanted to pursue,
Yeah.
to follow, to create. So yeah, I call it The Death of the King by Iranian playwright Bahram Bezai.
Mm.
Was one of the major projects, major play that really changed my life,
Mm. Mm.
and I'm very grateful. Very
Wow.
grateful to it. Yeah.
And you produced that in Toronto as well?
In Toronto, like it was in 1994. That was the first production of it. The translation was by myself and Peter Farbridge, the co-artistic director of the company. We did it together.
Yeah.
And again in 2016, we did it in a co-production with the Theatre Center at the Theatre Center in Toronto. And
Yeah.
we were planning to tour it to San Francisco, to Stanford University. It was a co-production with Stanford University, but we were denied American visa.
I think we talked
Yeah,
about this. I think
that's right.
yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
right.
And it was
Wow.
like heartbreaking because
Yeah.
we spent like about $40,000 already. Tickets were sold in the U.S. and like suddenly like 2 days before our flight, we were informed that we were denied. But again, we were lucky. The company we had good insurance, so everything was covered. Like the $40,000, they
It was
covered it.
right. So you
Thank
didn't
God. Yeah,
continue
yeah.
the show with new actors or anything. You couldn't do that.
No, that yeah. Basically, that was they didn't explain anything. Just that some technical issues, some information wasn't there, but you never know.
Ah,
But again, like when then I realized it wasn't only us. We noticed
right.
that been many different theater companies around the world have been denied going to the U.S.
It's so frustrating.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the story about the death of the king.
Wow.
Um, so it is like I just checking. This is like 8:20. I would like to ask you one more question.
Okay.
Is it okay? Do you
Yeah,
have time? Okay.
sure.
All right. And this is like again comes to again my interest as a director.
Sure.
Uh, um, okay. What is it? Let me just find it. Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. I would like to tell me a little bit about like mm, your stylistic approach to theater. What style of theater? Like, we talk a little bit. I said, like, I'm not really friendly with naturalism or
Right.
to realism, in theater. I would like to hear a little bit more about like your stylistic approach, your aesthetic, um,
Right.
uh, or perhaps like you're still like exploring, you're still like finding, or but I think you have more than that. I think you have a style, you have an aesthetic.
Yeah.
I strongly believe you do, and I would like to hear more about that if you can
Sure.
just.
Yeah. And I kind of break myself into like writer and then director. And sometimes my writing goes in a really different direction than when I
Yeah.
devise and direct a play. So when I'm devising, I mean, I don't have a huge body of work, but in terms of like the work that I have done, I would say I always begin with like the empty space. And then it's really about the actor and the actor's relationship to the audience. um, I'm interested in like a poetic space, so really stimulating the audience's imagination, and then finding a way to find a kind of cohesion with design and all of the elements that are centered around the actor. So, for example, a play that we created based on poems by a Polish writer, we began that exploration with just the poetry and the voice and the body. And
Wow.
from
Okay.
there, we explored what happens when we bring in a musician and a live
Ah,
musician and then play with sound, voice, body. And then from there, how do we bring in a designer that can kind of take the world? The poet's name is Wisława Szymborska. So we kind of fell in love with her and we just wanted everything aesthetically. And I say we because as I'm a director, it's
mhm.
devising. So I make the
Yeah.
final decision, but a lot of the work is, together. And so every aspect, every line, every light bulb, like in the space was all connected to her poetry.
Hmm.
So finding a way that like the center of it was the heart of this poet. And then the next is like the actor, the most important. And yeah, creating a play that has a kind of aesthetic that is minimal, really, but a kind of poetic space. I'm not interested in naturalism either.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, like I noticed, yeah, studying at Lecoq, doing movement, yeah,
Experiment.
device creation, yeah, yeah, like it was interesting in the description you give, you describe your work, poetic, relevant, and experimental.
Yeah.
That was quite exciting, like especially like experimental and poetic that fascinated me. Relevant is of course like right, but for me like it's like relevance is very interesting. Depends to our definition of that relevance.
Totally.
Like
Yeah.
we had a very interesting in conversation with a friend. So like, did you consider Beckett relevant or not? I consider him absolutely relevant.
Yeah.
Every time, anytime I read Beckett, every time I watch Beckett, I found him absolutely relevant.
Yeah.
Depends like how we get it, but yeah, like that experimentation. That's is fascinating. I love it. That's why we were connected as two artists, because there's a lot of similarities in search. You're searching. I'm still
Yeah.
searching after all these years, after 40 years of working and creating theater. I'm still searching. I'm
Yeah.
not satisfied. I'm still like finding things and reading constantly, trying to update myself, and always I think, oh, I don't know much. So like the more I read, the more I try to understand, and then I realize that I like basically I don't understand
Totally.
anything.
Well, that's what your curiosity though, like that is like, I feel like that's such an important aspect of being a human being and an artist is always being curious and always asking questions. And that's what keeps you being young as well, I think, right? Like there's something about yeah, I remember Peter Brook, like one of his actors. I was when I lived in England for a while, and I remember I went and saw a play, and then Peter Brook called this actor on the phone, and he was like asking the actor all these questions, but his play was already up on stage. But he was like, but what about this? And maybe this, and maybe the story should be this. And he was constantly asking him questions. And the actor I was with, Marcello Manni, he was like, that's how he stays young, and that's how he is the artist he is, because it's a constant search and he's never going to give up. And it's like, that's to me kind of why like I'm an artist, because I think it is about the search.
Yeah. It's about the search. Yeah. It makes you more vulnerable. It comes with a great deal of vulnerability. Definitely. And I think it is important. For me, it's like essential for artists to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's so important. And when you get like this, like people with a strong opinion and they know everything already before even they walk into the rehearsal space, they know everything about the play. As you just said, mentioned Peter Brook, I think that's a place the deadly theater happens.
Right.
It's going to get deadly. Like, when you know everything and you walk in and everything is already decided. This is like, there's no room. Yeah, there's no room for vulnerability, and vulnerability is so important.
Yes. And it's a reflection of our world, right? Like if, our world right now is fractured and there's a lot of chaos, and there are a lot of people that know things with a capital K. Like, I think that us as artists is really important to kind of slow down the chaos so that we can actually see the complexity.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that there are many truths. But the idea of vulnerability is so important, so important. Yeah, it was interesting coming to this room before we all got on Zoom. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm about to go on stage. Like, I feel really vulnerable. Like, my name is up there. Like, oh my gosh, what questions is he gonna ask me? But it's like, it's exciting.
I don't think that I had an easier time. Same thing for me. Like, I was supposed to ask questions, but yeah, I think that's what it is. I think, we are humans, and you can sometimes put a very strong mask and not to be yourself. And I think I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in those people like that, good for them. They want to show that strength, and but I said, like, I would like to see your humanity. I want to see your soul. And that's okay if you mumble and you forget what you want to say. And so yes.
And I know the time is probably coming near, but I wanted to ask you about the project that you're doing for Around the World in 80 Plays with Soul Pepper.
Yes, that's amazing. This is a remarkable adaptation of a classic poem. A 12th century poem by Iranian Sufi poet Attar. It's been adapted by wonderful Guillermo Verdicchia. So it's a beautiful piece. I love that piece. It's an amazing, an allegorical journey of a story of thousands of birds in search of enlightenment and truth. It's like fascinating story about humanity. Yeah, it is really amazing, and I'm looking forward to it. Still we're working on the recording, cleaning up things, and working with my designer, sound designer, Thomas Payne. He's amazing, so it is going very well. And I think still we have some more work to do to finish the project. Still, like, we finished the first recording, the first phase, and we have a little bit more things to do to clean up and polish, and so this is quite exciting. Yeah.
And it's called Parliament of the Birds.
The Parliament of the Birds. Yeah.
Parliament of the Birds.
Yeah. This is like, that's a second version. Second translation, major translation in the Western world. The first one was done by Peter Brook and Jean-Claude Carrier, the French playwright. She has recently passed away, I think about 6 months ago. Jean-Claude Carrier. Yeah. So they did a very beautiful adaptation of the poem, It's called The Conference of the Birds.
Yeah.
It was in 1979. They did it, I think, in Paris, and traveled around the world. So this is Guillermo Verdicchia's adaptation, Canadian adaptation of the poem, which is like quite remarkable, and I'm quite happy with it.
And it's audio with it's Soheil Parsa and CBC.
That's right.
Right. That's really exciting. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's a part of Ideas, the beautiful program. They have Ideas. So yeah. So they invite some scholars and they can talk about this, because it's based on a Sufi poem. So it's very strongly connected to the Sufi philosophy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a beautiful, classic poem. Yeah. Epic.
I'm excited for that. I signed up.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, I'm really grateful to Guillermo Verdicchia for what he has done, and he's amazing. Yeah,
he's a fantastic playwright. Yeah, translator.
Very well. I think we're at 8:30, and it's an hour, and I can't believe it that time flies. It just went so fast. Yeah. And Coleen, thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation. So that was great. Frankly, I learned a lot. I learned a lot by just talking and contemplating on this question. And so, and the way you described, your life, your journey, that was really fascinating. Thank you so much. Thank you for this.
It's such an honor to chat with you, as always. I look forward to the time where we get to go to the Green Beanery with a cup of coffee in a space, in an actual place with walls. Right?
Yes, I can't wait for that. I think hopefully it's coming. The vaccines are out.
Yes.
Things are changing. Hopefully, in a few months down the road, we'll be in a better situation. Not back to normal. We all know there wasn't normal. We are not talking about that kind of normality. We are talking about a better situation, and I'm sure it's going to happen. And as long as we make sure that we have to stay safe and healthy till we see the good days.
Exactly. Yeah, stay safe and healthy, everybody who's here. And thanks for everyone for being here and listening. That was really great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much, both of you. That was lovely. Oh, I really appreciate both of you. Thank you so much. So I guess that's it. Everyone's free to go. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are going to be having our showcase for our NB Ensemble tomorrow. So if you are interested in tuning in for that, our link is on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram page to register for that free presentation. But other than that, I hope everyone has a safe night. Thank you again to Soheil and Coleen. You're wonderful.